The letter in my hand wasn't mine. It had my neighbor's name across the front, a bold return address from the county courthouse, and a bright orange final notice stamp. It was wedged halfway into my box, half torn open as if someone had already tried to peek inside. That was the moment I knew the rumors about Karen, the HOA president, weren't just gossip. I'd heard whispers for months. Missing bills, late fees that never arrived, neighbors insisting they never got their HOA statements while Karen claimed they must have been lost in the mail. People grumbled, but no one pushed back. After all, who was going to stand up to a woman who strutted around like she owned the entire subdivision? But now I had proof, because this wasn't just a lost envelope. This was federal mail tampering. I called my wife over. "This isn't ours," I said, holding the half-torn letter carefully by the edges. "She's been in our mailbox." Her face paled. "You think Karen?" I didn't think. I knew. She had been patrolling the neighborhood every afternoon with that ridiculous clipboard, barking about trash cans, barking about weeds, barking about the length of kids' basketball games in their own driveways. And now she was bold enough to stick her hands into private mailboxes, as if nothing could touch her. I was ex-military. Discipline and patience were second nature to me, but this wasn't just about a power-hungry HOA tyrant. This was federal territory. Karen had crossed into a battlefield she couldn't control. That night I sat at my desk under the soft hum of the desk lamp, typing up everything I had seen and heard. Dates, times, neighbors' complaints, a timeline of her little empire of intimidation. And with each keystroke I could almost hear her voice, the smug way she'd tell me, "Rules are rules. If you don't like it, maybe this isn't the neighborhood for you." I wasn't going to run. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The plan was simple. I'd report the tampering, hand over the evidence, and let the system catch up to her. But as I looked out my front window, I froze. Headlights were idling across the street. A dark SUV, engine running, no one getting out. I leaned closer to the blinds, heart steady, mind calculating. And then, just as I was about to turn away, I saw the driver's door crack open. Someone stepping out slowly, clutching a clipboard that looked all too familiar. The SUV door clicked shut, and under the flickering glow of the streetlight, I saw her. Karen, clipboard in one hand, flashlight in the other, prowling like some self-appointed sheriff of the cul-de-sac. She scanned the houses as if she were running a military patrol, though the only uniform she wore was entitlement. I stayed low behind the blinds, watching as she walked up to my neighbor's mailbox again. She didn't even bother to check if anyone was watching. The arrogance was staggering. She flipped the lid, shined her flashlight inside, and slipped something out before casually tucking it under her arm. Then she turned, smiled faintly at the darkness, and strutted back to her SUV. I pulled out my phone and hit record, zooming in just enough to catch her in the act. Every step she took was burned into evidence. The next morning, my wife whispered, "What are we going to do?" over coffee. "We're going to be patient," I said, "and we're going to be smart. This isn't just HOA harassment anymore. It's federal crime. The postal inspector will want this." But Karen didn't slow down. That week, notices began showing up on doors, taped at eye level like warnings. Fines for imaginary infractions, grass too long, improper holiday decorations, unapproved vehicle. And curiously, every one of those notices had neighbors muttering that they never received the initial warnings because Karen had intercepted them. By Thursday, the neighborhood felt divided. Some folks crossed the street to whisper to me, grateful someone was watching. Others kept their blinds drawn tight, terrified of retaliation. And a handful, they defended her. "Karen keeps things orderly," they muttered. "If you're not guilty, you've got nothing to worry about." Fear disguised as compliance. I wasn't afraid. That night, I uploaded the video to a secure drive and sent a copy straight to the postal inspector's office. I also logged the mysterious lost notices, snapping photos of everything. My evidence file was growing heavier by the day. The next evening, I spotted two men in neon vests walking down our block. They weren't postal workers. Their inspector badges were printed on flimsy plastic cards, hanging off lanyards that looked fresh from a dollar store. They went door to door, jotting things down, peeking into yards. When they stopped at my property line, one of them smirked. "Evening, we're with the HOA Inspection Committee. We'll need to take a closer look at your mailbox." I stepped outside, calm and steady. "Touch that box, let's see," I said, voice low but unshaking, "and you'll regret it." They froze, exchanging a glance. And then one of them pulled out a phone, muttering, We'll report this resistance to Karen. The so-called inspectors backed off that night, but their presence was just the beginning. The following morning, I found muddy boot prints near my mailbox, too heavy to be from the mail carrier. Then came the scratches on my front door, faint but deliberate. Someone had tried to pry it open. Karen's intimidation campaign was escalating. By now, the Postal Inspection Service had responded to my report. A calm, measured voice on the other end of the phone thanked me for the evidence and assured me an investigation was underway. They asked me to stay vigilant and, if possible, gather more. I didn't need to be told twice. I installed 2 additional cameras, one aimed at the mailbox, the other at the porch. Then I wired a small motion sensor along the side gate. If anyone tried sneaking onto my property again, I'd know. It took less than 48 hours. At 2:14 a.m. on a windless night, the motion alert pinged on my phone. I slid out of bed, moving silently toward the front window. A figure in a dark hoodie was crouched by my mailbox. The faint glint of a flashlight beam cut through the dark. Then a second figure appeared, taller, broader, keeping watch by the curb. They weren't there to tape notices. They were there to break in. I reached for the side table drawer and wrapped my hand around the cold metal of my tactical flashlight, a heavy-duty piece of gear I had carried through 2 deployments. Old instincts came rushing back. Control the environment, maintain visibility, never escalate first. I slipped out the back door and circled wide through the shadows, my boots silent against the grass. From the side of the house, I watched as the first figure yanked the mailbox door open and started rummaging inside. "Federal offense," I said, stepping into the beam of the streetlight. "Drop it, now." The figure froze. The taller one spun toward me, hand twitching toward his waistband. "Hands where I can see them," I commanded, voice steady and clipped. "Right now." The shorter one bolted. The taller hesitated, then followed. They vanished into the night before I could get a license plate, but I'd seen enough. The cameras had too. The next morning, I reviewed the footage and sent it directly to the postal investigators. But the stakes had shifted. Karen's crew wasn't just playing power games anymore. They were trespassing, tampering, testing how far they could go. And that night, as I returned from work, a new envelope was taped to my door in thick red marker. "Ese final warning, stop interfering, or we stop playing nice." I stood on the porch staring at the red marker letters bleeding across the envelope. My wife hovered behind me, voice trembling. "They're threatening us." "They've been threatening us," I said evenly. "Now they've just made it official." I slid the letter into a plastic evidence sleeve and checked the time, 7:38 p.m. That gave me less than an hour. The postal inspector had told me to keep reporting incidents, but tonight felt different. Tonight, Karen and her makeshift army were going to cross the line once and for all. I wasn't about to sit back and wait. By 8:15, I saw them. Headlights swarmed into the cul-de-sac. 3 vehicles this time. The SUV, a dented pickup, and a compact car I didn't recognize. Out poured 6 figures. Karen herself, clipboard clutched like a sword, flanked by her inspectors, and 2 men I hadn't seen before. Bigger, meaner. They weren't holding clipboards. They carried batons. Neighbors' blinds cracked open in the glow of the street lamps. Nobody came outside. Nobody dared. Karen stepped forward, her shrill voice slicing the night. "This is your last chance. Hand over the footage you've been collecting. You're violating HOA rules and obstructing our authority." I stepped off my porch, calm and deliberate, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other, already recording. "Karen," I said, "mail tampering is a federal offense. You're done." She laughed, sharp and mocking. "You think the feds care about a suburban squabble? We run this neighborhood." One of her muscle-bound recruits swung his baton against his palm, inching closer. "Hand over the camera systems, now." I raised the flashlight, its beam cutting across his eyes. "Step onto this property," I warned, "and I'll Either you an intruder, do you understand me?" Karen snapped her fingers. "Get it, now." The 2 men surged forward. That was their mistake. I pivoted, sidestepping the first strike, and jammed the flashlight into the attacker's ribs, hard enough to stagger him. The second swung wide. I ducked low, swept his legs, and sent him crashing onto the pavement. Gasps rippled from the neighbors' windows. Karen shrieked, "Stop him! He's assaulting you!" But the tide had turned. I stood over the 2 groaning men, voice ringing out. "Every second of this is being recorded. You're done, Karen. You brought impersonators, you tampered with mail, and now you've brought weapons onto private property. You think you can scare me?" I locked eyes with her, letting the silence stretch. "They thought they could break me," I said, steady as stone, "but they didn't know who they were dealing with." And right then, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. The wail of the sirens cut through the night like a blade. Red and blue lights spilled across the cul-de-sac as two squad cars screeched to a stop. Behind them, an unmarked government sedan pulled in, headlights washing over Karen and her ragtag crew. The moment the doors opened, I knew the game had shifted. Uniformed officers stepped out first, followed by two men in suits with the unmistakable presence of federal investigators, postal inspectors. "Step away from the homeowner," one of the officers barked. "Hands visible." Karen froze, clipboard trembling in her grip. The two hired muscle groaned on the pavement, their batons clattering uselessly to the asphalt. The fake inspectors raised their hands high, their plastic badges swinging mockingly under the cruiser's lights. I lowered my flashlight, steady and calm, and gestured toward them. "These are your suspects: mail tampering, impersonation of federal officers, harassment, attempted trespass, and assault." My voice carried, firm and measured. The lead postal inspector approached, his badge flashing silver in the glow. "Sir, we've been tracking complaints in this neighborhood for months. Your evidence sealed it. Good work." Karen's voice cracked, high-pitched and panicked. "This is absurd. I am the HOA president. I have the authority—" "Ma'am," the inspector cut her off, voice cold. "You have no authority over federal property, and you certainly don't have authority to steal residents' mail." He nodded toward the officers. "Take her in." The sight was something I'll never forget. Karen's face crumpling, rage and disbelief twisting together as handcuffs clicked tight around her wrists. The so-called inspectors were cuffed next, their dollar store badges bagged as evidence. Even the two muscle thugs were dragged up from the ground, booked for assault and trespassing. Neighbors spilled out onto their porches, finally emboldened. Whispers turned into cheers. For the first time, the cul-de-sac wasn't silent with fear, it was alive with relief. My wife slipped her hand into mine. "It's over," she whispered. I nodded. "Almost?" The inspector turned back to. "Oh me. You'll need to give a statement, but rest assured, we're dismantling her entire operation. The HOA board will be restructured. Every fine, every bogus notice, wiped clean." It took weeks for the dust to settle, but the fallout was permanent. Karen faced multiple charges: federal mail theft, impersonation, harassment. Her reign of intimidation collapsed in a single night. The HOA was stripped of its corrupt leadership, and a new committee, neighbors I trusted, took its place. Months later, the subdivision sign that once proudly read Oak Ridge HOA came down. No more clipboard patrols, no more lost letters, just peace. And as I stood on my porch at sunset, the quiet finally felt different. Not the fearful silence Karen had enforced. The kind of silence you earn after a battle won. The cul-de-sac was free. As the sun set over the cul-de-sac, the only sound left was silence. The kind of silence you earn after a battle won.